My name's Tyler Grayson. I'm 41, white, born and raised in the green-brown middle of Missouri, the kind of place where every gas station also sells worms, beer, and Bible verses printed on laminated bookmarks. I work construction management now, live outside Columbia with my second wife Hannah and my stepson, Theo. Good kid, smarter than I was at his age, which is humbling and mildly terrifying. This story isn't about my new life, though. It's about what came crawling out of the cracks in my old one. 2 years ago, I divorced Melissa. 9 years of marriage, no kids, just the usual slow-moving hurricane of mismatched expectations and undercooked communication. She wanted candlelit dinners and couples yoga. I wanted takeout and a couch that didn't talk back. We weren't bad people, just bad for each other. We split without lawyers clawing out throats. I took the dog. She got the car and a surprisingly generous chunk of my sanity. We didn't talk much after that, which was the plan. We had no reason to. No custody battles, no co-owned furniture to haggle over. We were officially out of each other's orbit. Or so I thought. A few months back, I stopped by my parents' place to help my dad change out a busted bathroom fan. They still live in the house I grew up in, same brown shingles, same cracked front steps my mom keeps saying they'll fix this summer, and the same coffee pot that sounds like it's brewing gravel. Anyway, we're sitting in the kitchen, sipping what passes for coffee in that household, and my dad goes, "You know, Melissa checks in more than you do." I nearly spit into my mug. "Wait, what?" "She brought banana muffins last week," my mom chimes in, smiling like this is a perfectly normal update. "Helped me figure out the printer too. She's been coming by for months now." Real sweet of her. Months. Months. I hadn't heard Melissa's name in a year and a half, and now she's over here baking muffins and playing IT consultant? This is the same woman who used to act like my parents were made of cold oatmeal and forced conversation. Let me explain something about my folks. They're polite Midwesterners. They believe in waving at people even if you hate their guts. You could have a neighbor poisoning your dog and they'd still say, well, at least he mows his lawn. They never saw the tail end of my marriage the way I did. To them, Melissa was the smiling woman at Thanksgiving who once brought a yam casserole and knew how to talk about books. To me, Melissa was a performance, all curtain, no play. And now she was back. Embedded, somehow, in my parents' quiet life like a leftover scent. Subtle, warm, and entirely unwelcome. That night, I went home and told Hannah. She raised one eyebrow the way she does when she's trying not to say "I told you so." She never liked Melissa too slick, too sugary. "She's not helping out of kindness," Hannah said, pouring wine. "She's helping out of strategy." I laughed at first, but I stopped laughing when I started connecting the dots. Because Melissa didn't want me back. She wanted my place. You ever get the feeling someone's playing chess and you didn't even know you were on the board? That's how it felt after I found out Melissa was spending quality time with my parents. I couldn't figure out what move she was making, but it wasn't banana muffins. Still, I didn't react. That's how she wins. You raise your voice, she cries victim. You push back, suddenly you're controlling again. No thanks. I've seen that play before. Instead, I decided to do what any rational adult would do, quietly investigate like a suspicious raccoon with a clipboard. So, the next Saturday, I pulled up to my parents' house unannounced. Now, unannounced is a loaded word in my family. It means you'll still be invited in, but you might catch my dad in his slippers and my mom scrubbing the sink like she's hiding evidence. Sure enough, Mom opened the door with a surprised, "Oh, Tyler," as if I'd risen from the grave. I stepped into the kitchen and noticed something immediately, a white ceramic dish, empty, sitting on the counter. "Melissa's?" I asked, nodding toward it. She hesitated just a fraction too long. "Oh, yes. She brought lasagna Thursday." Lasagna. Thursday. Like this was a scheduled route. Trash day on Wednesday, ex-wife on Thursday. "Yeah, she said she's trying out new recipes now that she's doing meal prep," Mom added. "She's very organized lately." Melissa's always been organized. She's the kind of person who color codes her closet and alphabetizes her spices. It's not impressive when you know she does it to control things, not to make life easier. In fact, it's kind of terrifying. I once watched her rewrite a guest list 6 times because she didn't like the way the names sounded when read aloud. We sat down for lunch, leftover chicken salad, store-bought potato wedges, and a quiet tension thick enough to butter. My dad scrolled through his phone while Mom chatted about her book club. But my mind was stuck on one thing. Why? Why was my ex-wife spending her Thursdays at the house of the man she divorced? There's no love lost between us. She didn't want kids. My parents never pressured her. But they wanted grandkids someday. Now they dote on my stepson like he's made of gold. Melissa never connected with him. So again, why? The answer came during a throwaway comment from Mom as I stood to leave. She said something funny, actually. Joked about how she might move in one day if we ever need help. I froze halfway into my coat. She what? Oh, just a joke. You know how she is. Yeah, I do. That wasn't a joke. That was groundwork. Melissa wasn't just dropping off food. She was moving pieces, getting familiar with the space, making herself indispensable before anyone realized what she was doing. She was building a narrative. And in that version of the story, I was the absent son. The flaky, too busy, selfish man who ran off to his new life and left his aging parents in the care of someone more loyal. She was rewriting history, and unless I did something, people were going to start believing it. Driving home that day, I gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I could feel something low and slow brewing in my chest. You know that feeling when someone borrows something from you without asking? Like your coat or your tools. Now imagine it's your family. That's where I was. I replayed Mom's voice in my head. She said something funny. Joked about moving in. Funny like the flu. Melissa doesn't make offhand comments. She lobs grenades in gift wrap. It's always just a suggestion. Just an idea. Just in case. Right before she casually sets fire to whatever used to be yours. Still, I couldn't exactly accuse her of anything. What would I say? Hey, Melissa. Could you not insert yourself into my parents' golden years like a malware pop-up? No, this wasn't about confrontation. This was about positioning. Hannah noticed it right away when I walked in the door. She was on the couch with Theo watching a cooking competition show, and she muted it before I even spoke. That's how you know you've got a real partner, when they listen before you even make a sound. Your parents again? She asked. Melissa again. I told her everything. The meals, the printer help, the casual I might move in comment. She didn't say much. Just chewed the inside of her cheek like she was calculating odds in a poker game. Then, finally, you're gonna have to remind them who you are. Not prove. Remind. And just like that, the plan began. I started with the obvious time. I rearranged my work schedule to swing by every Saturday. At first, it felt awkward, like showing up to a party after it already started. I half expected Melissa to be there, adjusting the blinds and offering unsolicited advice about elder care. But she wasn't. And my mom, bless her, greeted me each week like I was a nice neighbor. Not her only son. Oh, what a surprise. Like it was unusual for me to visit. Like I hadn't spent 30 years in that living room. I brought small things. Old photo albums I found in storage. My dad's favorite fudge from the farmer's market. A copy of The Godfather on Blu-ray because their DVD had given up the ghost. The goal wasn't to compete with Melissa. It was to outlast her. Because I knew her pattern. Melissa is like a seasonal candle. She smells nice, makes the house feel warm, but eventually burns out and leaves soot. She's not built for long games. But I am. 2 weeks in, my mom stopped mentioning Melissa. 3 weeks in, my dad handed me a list of small things to fix around the house. On week 4, we watched The Godfather together. My mom fell asleep halfway through, and Dad and I quoted the lines we remembered from when I was a kid. It's not personal, son. It's strictly business. I looked at him and smiled. Yeah, I'm starting to understand that part. About 6 weeks into this quiet campaign. No arguments, no confrontations, no what are you doing here? Dramatics. I noticed something. My chair at the kitchen table didn't have a coaster under the leg anymore. That sounds like nothing, I know. But my mom, God love her, runs her kitchen like a museum exhibit. Every seat has its coaster. Mine had always been the red one with a chipped corner from 2004. My dad broke it with a dropped coffee cup and swore it added character. But the week I came back, that coaster had been gone. Replaced. A fresh blue one sat under that chair instead. It was subtle, but in my bones I knew. Melissa had been using my chair. I didn't say anything, just tucked the blue coaster in the drawer and replaced it with the old red one. Still in the drawer behind the batteries and expired coupons. I put it back like it was never gone. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was being paranoid. I wasn't. I was being hunted in my own history. Melissa had inserted herself into their lives because it made her feel important. That's who she is. She doesn't need to be loved, she just needs to be needed. Desperately. And my parents? They'd always been too kind. Too polite. If she offered to do laundry, they probably said yes just to avoid hurting her feelings. If she offered to help manage their prescriptions, they probably handed her a list and said thank you. They didn't see the angle because they don't think like that. But I do. One afternoon, I stopped by with a rotisserie chicken and some photos of Theo's science fair. It had been a rough week. My stepson had gotten into a shoving match at school, and I had to take time off work to talk to the counselor. Nothing serious, but stressful. I brought it up to my dad over dinner, half expecting some old-school boys will be boys comment. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye and said, I never would have had the patience for that kind of thing when you were his age. You're doing it right. I blinked. My dad isn't the type to hand out compliments like coupons. And just like that, I felt my seat at the table warm up again. Like the roots were still there, just waiting for me to water them. And then 2 days later, the frost came back. My mom called. Casual tone. Lighthearted even. And then she said this. Melissa asked about staying here for a little while. Said it might be easier for us if she were around more. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Not out of shock, but strategy. I needed my voice calm. She asked to move in? Just offered, really. Said we shouldn't be alone so much. She meant well. She always means well. That's the genius of Melissa, she weaponizes generosity. I told my mom I'd be by that weekend. What I didn't tell her was that before I walked in that front door again, I'd be carrying something Melissa didn't know I had. A signature. Not hers. 2, actually. And a notarized date on the bottom. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Melissa slowly replacing me in my parents' minds. Not out of malice, but out of design. She was always good at rewriting stories, even our marriage. After the divorce, people asked what happened, and she'd smile that sad little smile and say, we just wanted different things. No. She wanted control. I wanted peace. So I called a lawyer. Missouri law is pretty straightforward when it comes to durable power of attorney for medical and financial decisions. The person has to be of sound mind, sign voluntarily, and be witnessed or notarized depending on the document. My folks were still sharp, especially my mom. She could quote dates, recipes, and every guest at my wedding in order of appearance. Dad? Still steady, just a little slower than he used to be. The idea wasn't to take anything from Melissa. It was to make sure she never had a chance to take anything from them. See, if something happened, a fall, a stroke, a surgery gone sideways, someone would need to make decisions. And right now, that person was nobody. They'd never updated anything since my grandma passed. No executor. No power of attorney. Just an old will printed from some generic legal site back in the Bush administration. I brought it up casually over coffee that weekend. Have you two done any estate planning recently? Mom raised her eyebrows. You trying to put us in the ground? Dad snorted. You can have the fishing rods and the bills. No, I mean seriously. If something happened, a hospital thing, who talks to the doctors? Who pays the bills if you're out of commission? They exchanged a look. The kind of look people give when they know the answer but don't like it. Mom finally said, I suppose it would be you? I mean, who else would it be? Melissa, I thought. But I didn't say it. Instead, I said I talked to a lawyer friend. Said it's smart to have something formal. Power of attorney. Medical and financial. Mom nodded slowly. Can you bring the forms? Already printed, I said, smiling. I'll bring a notary too. We can do it over lunch. Real simple. They agreed. Not because they were alarmed, but because it made sense. Because they trusted me. And deep down, I think they were starting to question Melissa too. Her visits had slowed a bit. She wasn't bringing muffins anymore. The shine was fading. A week later, I showed up with 2 folders, 3 pens, and my friend Nate, who moonlights as a notary public on weekends. Mom laid out sandwiches. Dad told Nate he looked like a guy who once sold him a truck. Typical. They signed both documents without hesitation. Medical and financial POAs with my name on each. Witnessed. Notarized. Filed. And just like that, I wasn't defending my place anymore. I owned it. Melissa didn't know yet, of course. But soon, she'd try to walk through a door that no longer opened. And my dad, quiet, gruff, stubborn old man that he is, would be the one to tell her she didn't have a key. I got the call on a Thursday. Late afternoon. I was knee-deep in a site inspection out near Fulton, trying to explain to a subcontractor why eyeballing it isn't an acceptable method for pouring a concrete footer. My mom's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, figuring it was just another update about the hummingbird feeder or a new book club selection. She called again 2 minutes later. That's not a hummingbird call. I stepped away from the crew and answered. She came by, Mom said without preamble. I didn't need to ask who. Melissa. Her voice was tight, not scared, just strained. Like someone trying to hold a smile with a sore jaw. What did she want? She said she brought a casserole, Mom said. But she never took it out of the car. I stayed quiet. Let her keep going. Then she asked if we'd had a chance to think about her offer. Said she could take the guest room, help out around the house, maybe start sorting through the old garage stuff. There it was. The bid for territory. Melissa always had this way of planting ideas like they were already decided. She didn't ask to move in, she mentioned it like she'd already been given the go-ahead and was just waiting on the mattress delivery. And what did you say? We told her, Mom said. We're all set now. I smiled before I even realized it. You said it just like that? Your dad did. Stood right at the door. Said, we're all set now, Melissa. You don't need to come by anymore. Then he closed it. Let me tell you something about my dad. This is a man who once argued with a parking attendant for 20 minutes rather than pay for valet service. A man who refused to let a plumber into the house because he believed he could fix a leaking toilet with duct tape and faith. My dad does not like confrontation. He avoids it like lima beans. And he had shut the door on her. That's when I knew. Whatever illusion Melissa had built, whatever fantasy she was spinning about being the trusted confidant, the loyal surrogate daughter, it had cracked. She'd overplayed it. I asked Mom how she took it. Well, she said, pausing for dramatic effect, she stood on the porch for a minute like she expected us to change our minds. Then she said something like, this isn't what I expected from you too. No doubt. Melissa thought she'd wormed her way back in. That she could out-ice, out-help, and outlast me. What she didn't count on was me being quiet about it. Strategic. Playing the long game. She didn't know I'd already been there. Fixed the screen door. Cleaned the gutters. Rewired the garage outlet she kept claiming just sparked sometimes. Melissa was fighting for a throne she didn't realize had already been welded down. And my parents? They didn't need a caretaker. They needed a son who showed up. After that call, I expected fireworks. Melissa doesn't fold neatly. She reacts like a stuck gear, grinding, smoking, throwing sparks just to prove she can still turn. But nothing. No angry texts. No fake friendly voicemails. No back-channel messages through mutual friends. Just silence. It wasn't relief I felt. It was suspicion. Because silence from Melissa is never surrender. It's simmering. 2 days later, I stopped by my parents' place with a box of donut holes and a new digital thermostat. Their old one had a dial that barely turned and probably dated back to Reagan. I knocked, then walked in because it's still my name on the spare key. I found my mom at the dining table, polishing silverware for no reason other than she said it helped her think. My dad was in the garage, organizing tools, which really meant he was shuffling hammers around and pretending he didn't need new glasses. We talked like normal. About Theo's school, about the neighbor's dog that keeps digging holes under their fence, about the thermostat I was about to install that would, quote, spy on them through the internet. Then, just as I was about to leave, my mom said, "We got a letter." From Melissa? She nodded and slid the envelope across the table like it was a dirty magazine she didn't want to be seen holding. It wasn't handwritten. Melissa's handwriting is too perfect, too symmetrical, the kind of penmanship that makes you nervous your response won't meet her aesthetic standards. This was printed, typed, and formatted like a business memo. I didn't want to read it. But I did. It was exactly what I expected and somehow worse. She didn't apologize. She didn't even ask to explain. Instead, it read like a testimonial, a reminder of all the ways she'd been there over the last year. The muffins, the grocery runs, the printer repairs, the fact that she never expected anything in return. Which is, of course, exactly what people say right before listing what they expected in return. She closed with a line that stuck to my ribs. It's unfortunate that kindness can be so easily misinterpreted as manipulation. That sentence alone was enough to make me want to drive to her apartment and leave a thank you card wrapped around a brick. But I didn't. Instead, I folded the letter, tucked it back into the envelope, and said, "She's done." My mom didn't nod. She just looked at me, and I mean looked. Like she was seeing something in me she hadn't noticed in years. "You were always quiet when you were angry," she said. "Like your father. But when you make up your mind." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. That was the moment I realized something important. Melissa had spent the last year trying to audition for a role that was never open. And while she was busy performing, I'd been living it. Not as the loudest voice in the room, just as the one who stayed. You ever sit in an old chair and feel like it finally fits again? That's how it felt walking through my parents' hallway after Melissa was out of the picture. Same carpet. Same dent in the wall from when I tripped over a laundry basket at 16. But the air had shifted. Calmer. Cleaner. Mine again. I didn't say any big victory speech. I didn't need to. Sometimes reclaiming something doesn't require a flag, just presence. But that didn't mean I let my guard down. Because I know Melissa. She doesn't take losing well, especially when no one acknowledges that she lost. Silence to her is worse than insult. It means she didn't matter. And for someone who breathes significance like oxygen, that's devastating. Still, weeks passed. No more letters. No dry buys. No awkward just thought I'd check in pop-ins with a Tupperware dish full of weaponized casseroles. Just peace. And in that peace, my parents finally started letting go of the script she wrote for them. My mom began calling me when she couldn't figure out the remote. Not the tech-savvy helper. Me. My dad asked if I could look into getting them a medical alert service, not one Melissa had recommended from an ad she saw on Facebook, but one I trusted. They stopped tiptoeing around her name. It was like someone opened a window and let the air out of a house that had been holding its breath. The real kicker came one Sunday afternoon. I was over fixing the fence again because the neighbor's golden retriever has a PhD in tunnel engineering. I was elbow-deep in a trench, covered in dirt, sweating like a condemned man, when my dad came out with 2 beers and sat on the edge of the porch. We drank in silence for a bit. That's our style. Not a lot of filler. Just breathing the same air. Then he said, "She almost had us, you know." I looked up. He wasn't joking. "Melissa. She's clever. Friendly. Real good at making herself part of things. And your mother and I," he took a sip. "We were tired. We wanted to believe someone just wanted to help." He paused. "But I've been thinking about that night I told her, we're all set now." I stayed quiet. Let him talk. That felt like the first time in a long while I'd said something true to her. Felt good. That hit me harder than I expected. My dad, stubborn, stoic, never once helped Dad, admitting he'd been taken. Even just a little. And that standing up to it hadn't felt like conflict. It had felt like relief. I didn't say much back. Just raised my beer. He raised his too. And we toasted not to revenge, not to victory, but to clarity. That was the thing Melissa never understood. Control doesn't last. But trust? Trust is earned quietly, over time, and once you've got it, you don't have to fight for your seat anymore. You just sit down. 3 Sundays later, my mom hosted one of her small dinners, which is code for feeds an entire church choir and sends leftovers home in foil. She cooked brisket. From scratch. Even made that vinegary potato salad my wife swears tastes like punishment, but my dad and I love it. Hannah and Theo came with me this time. Felt right. Like a final thread had been pulled back into the cloth. No tension. No side eyes. Just my family in a house that felt like ours again. Halfway through dinner, as Theo was telling an overly dramatic story about how his science teacher had absolutely lost her mind over a mislabeled volcano, my mom went quiet. Then she smiled, a real one, soft and tired at the edges, and reached over to brush something off my shirt. "I'm glad you started coming back around more. We didn't realize how much we missed it." I nodded, trying to play it cool. But I felt that. See, when you lose a parent, everyone talks about grief. When you drift from a parent, no one tells you how long the silence echoes. Melissa had filled that silence with sweetness and empty calories like a gas station pie. Looks fine, smells okay. But the second you take a bite, you know it's all filler. Later that evening, after Theo had passed out on the couch and my dad had gone off to clean his hearing aids, a task he treats like defusing a bomb, my mom pulled me aside in the hallway. "You know," she said, lowering her voice, "Melissa's sister called me last week. That stopped me. Said Melissa isn't doing so well. She's been spiraling a bit, drinking, talking about how unfair everything's been, about how we turned our backs on her." I didn't say anything. She asked if we'd reconsider. Said Melissa's intentions were misunderstood. I leaned against the wall. "What did you say?" I told her we already have someone. A son who shows up. A family that works. I told her we're not interested in reopening anything. Then she looked up at me and said something that cracked the shell I'd been carrying for 2 years. "We didn't see it before, Tyler. I think we wanted to, but you made us see it. Without yelling. Without proving anything. You just stayed. You ever feel a weight you didn't realize you were carrying finally slip off your shoulders? That was it. Melissa had been haunting my old life. Not by force, but by charm. And I get it, honestly. She was always good at playing the ghost. Always hovering in just the right light to look like something worth remembering. But now she was gone. Not banished. Not punished. Just forgotten. And that's worse for people like her than anything. Because people like Melissa don't fear being hated. They fear being irrelevant. And that's what she had finally become. An extra line in a story no one was telling anymore. The final Melissa sighting came from Jerry, the guy who runs the pharmacy my parents use. He's one of those small-town fixtures, the kind who knows everyone's prescriptions and everyone's secrets, and keeps both with professional silence unless he's had 2 beers. I bumped into him at the hardware store while buying a new hose nozzle for my dad. We made small talk about weather and arthritis meds. Then he leaned in a little. "Your ex came in last week," he said, glancing around like Melissa might be hiding behind a shelf of light bulbs. "Asked if your folks had changed their prescription pickup to delivery. Said she was just checking in." I smiled. "And told her they have someone who handles that now. Didn't say who." "Thanks, Jerry. Didn't do it for you," he said with a smirk. "Did it because she once lectured me on expiration dates like I wasn't standing in my own damn store. Fair." That's when it really sank in. The shadow she'd cast wasn't just fading. It had burned itself out. She'd gone from being the echo in the room to a footnote in a conversation you don't bother finishing. I didn't tell my parents about it. What was the point? Let the past knock on the wrong door for once. We'd already locked ours. And that's the thing I realized, sitting on their porch that weekend as my dad grilled hot dogs like they were fine cuts of Wagyu. Real revenge doesn't always look like vengeance. It looks like comfort. Like your mom humming in the kitchen again without tension behind it. Like your dad tossing you a beer without needing to say a word. Like your stepson curled up with your parents' ancient golden retriever, asleep under a quilt that smells like decades of Sunday dinners. Melissa hadn't just tried to take something from me. She tried to edit me out of my own history, and for a while it almost worked. But here's what she didn't get, and maybe never will. Control is temporary. Performance is exhausting. But being real and showing up over and over, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, that sticks. That becomes memory. That becomes truth. There was no climactic scene. No public meltdown. No screaming match at the front door with neighbors peeking through blinds. She just faded. And in her place was me. My family, my life, untouched, unbothered, unforgettable. We were all set, and that's how it stayed.